Hello, students in my government class at Oklahoma Panhandle State. My name is Dr. Monique Bruner, and I wanted to say hello. I wanted to get on and go through some things on our class just so that you know where everything is. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. So hopefully you can see my screen. My items may look a little bit different than yours because of my view. Let me see if I can go to student view. Maybe. I guess I should have figured this out before I got on here. Oh, there it is. Oops. I'm sorry. This is my first time recording a Zoom and trying to post it this way. So hopefully this is how you will see our D2L class. I try to post an announcement at least once a week. This morning early, I posted that our Module 1 is due this Friday. All of our due dates will be at 11:59 unless otherwise posted. So this next Friday coming up, our Module 1 is due. So let me just show you where some things are. If you click on content, you can obviously see our syllabus that is here. And if you scroll down on the syllabus, you can see all of the assignments. So Module 1 is due on Friday, the 26th. And you need to do the 10 things. And that's just 10 things that you want to share, that you would like to change about America. And they could be anything. I mean, it's just totally up to you. You just tell me what you want to change. You write a paragraph with explanation and be as detailed as possible that you can be. So a good example would be one thing I would want to change is to, I don't know, let's see, reduce student loan debt for those that have that. And in order, so that would be the list. That's what I would write for what I want to change. And then I would write, why do I want to change that? Because I myself have a lot of student loan debt. And I would be a lot better off financially if that debt was reduced. And so, and by giving back with community service and teaching in an urban area, those are ways that I've given back what I've learned from my education to society. Therefore, some of my loans should be reduced. Simple as that. You need to do 10 of those items. The next is the state and capital assignment. And you should be able to click just right on it from the syllabus. And then you just need to do the state and you need to do the capital and the state quiz. You need to do both quizzes in order to get the full 200 points. And so you need to do the intermediate. And again, you just click on it. It loads up. You say you want to play. And where's the capital of Nashville? It's in Tennessee.
Correct. Tallahassee.
And so it goes through all of them. And then you need to get at least a 93% in order to do it. And you can take that as many, 90% in order to get credit. And you can take it as many times as you want. What you need is you need to screenshot it once you received a 90% or higher. Do a screenshot, save it as a JPEG, upload 2 of them because you need to do the capitals and the states in the Dropbox. The other thing you have to do with Module 1 is you have to take the exam. All right, so then you say, well, what exactly is in our Module 1 and how do I get this information? You get the information by clicking on the content area that says Module 1. And then under Module 1, I have all of these different things. The most important is this review sheet. So you can go in and you can see these 3 items. Now, I do have a textbook for you all, and I haven't heard anybody say they couldn't get the textbook. You should be able to get it fairly cheaply on Amazon. But technically, even if you didn't get the textbook, you could probably still be successful in this class because I have everything in the PowerPoints. So if you look at what I call Chapter 1, and you can go through here, and it just gives you an idea of what is a democracy. So if you looked at the review sheet and you went through and answered those questions, you would be able to do that directly from these PowerPoints. It's really all the information that you need in the PowerPoints. Okay, so you go through those, and that's it. And so that one is chapter, that one was chapter 1. This is the one for chapter 2, which goes over the Constitution. And when we think about the Constitution, our early governments kind of have these compacts. A good example of this, kind of when we think about as you're going through all of this history. So many times people equate American federal government with history because of this one chapter where it looks at how the Constitution was put together. It goes through these processes of these rebellions, these different things that we did. And the most common thing that you hear is that the colonists had taxation without representation, and that's what they didn't want that. So we had all these different acts. On the exam, I don't ask you specifically what these different acts are about. I just want you to know that there were a number of items that led up to the revolution or the rebellion, and the big consequence was the Boston Massacre. When we think massacre today, we think of like hundreds of people, thousands of people dying. But back in 1770, 5 people died, and that was a massacre. And so one of the first ways that they started to communicate to each other was through committees of correspondence. And it was these mechanisms that got the word out. The Boston Tea Party, which is a piece of history that we often are kind of misinformed about or mistold. The colonists actually dressed up as American Indians and dumped the tea. I should probably go back and dump the tea in. Oh, it didn't go back. Dump the tea, and anyway, it was a big deal, and you had this shot heard around the world, which wasn't actually heard around the world, but that's what they say, which led to the First Continental Congress, where you had 56 delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies to meet. Excuse me. All of the colonies didn't meet because one was really scared. Then you had the Second Continental Congress. That's where common sense was very important, that Thomas Paine wrote to really galvanize support of the revolution. And then as we set up the new government, you have the Declaration of Independence. And one of the things we have here on slide 16 says the Declaration of Independence declared that human beings possess rights that cannot be legitimately given or taken away from them. People create government to protect these rights, and that if the government fails to protect people's rights or the government itself becomes a threat to them, people can withdraw their consent from that government and create a new one. It's pretty interesting the things that have happened within the last couple of weeks. The siege on the Capitol, and then we just recently had inauguration of our 46th president. Are we at a point to where we want to really have a new government? If so, what do you want this government to look like? How would you set it up? How would you do different? The original Declaration of Independence had some omissions. And those omissions were, it did not deal with slavery, and it didn't say anything about the political status of women, Native Americans, or African Americans who were slaves. So neither did it say anything about white people who were indigent servants or white men who did not own land. So really, they were only talking about a select few people. So we started off with I'm sorry. my children. Sorry. We started off with our first government and kind of our Articles of Confederation. And this really emphasized state sovereignty over national unity. And each state was given the authority to tax, coin money, impose trade barriers, and conduct free policy, amongst other things. Can you see how this was a problem? So I actually live in Oklahoma City, and in the Oklahoma metro area, we have several smaller suburbs. So we have Norman and Moore and Edmond and Yukon, Bethany, Midwest City. So can you imagine if all of these areas had their own money, set up their own laws, and did that? It would be insane because how would we know how to do anything? So the shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation were um, probably best represented, as it says in this slide, Shays' Rebellion. And so during Shays' Rebellion, what he wanted is for people to come back together in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. And so they weren't trying to write a constitution. They were just trying to revise these Articles of Confederation. So in order to do that, they came together. They wanted to create this stronger government. And these 55 men all met in the area in Philadelphia, and they were all very elite. They were not representative of what our country looked like, even at that time. The major players were James Madison. These are very important. James Madison with the Virginia Plan, William Patterson with the New Jersey Plan, and Roger Sherman with the Connecticut Plan, or the Connecticut Compromise. So basically, the Virginia Plan, are those who followed James Madison, were big proponents of three branches of government with a bicameral legislature, where members would be selected on the basis of the population for that particular state or that particular colony. The New Jersey Plan called for a unicameral legislature where each state would have one vote. So the Virginia Plan is more similar to what we now know as the House of Representatives, and the New Jersey Plan was more of what we are more familiar with now as the Senate. So really what happened is you have this just gives you a difference between the two plans. But really during this constitutional convention, we had this big debate, and we have what they call either the Connecticut Compromise or the Great Compromise, which married the two, the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan, together. So it gave you one area, which is the Senate, where each colony got two votes or two representatives. And then it gave you the House of Representatives, where you have the number of representatives based on the number of the population you have in that particular colony, are hence now today the state. And so I have a funny story about this. I traveled to Delaware with my family, and we did in Delaware, that was the first state to adopt the Constitution, and they do daily tours based like a period tour. So where they're based in period dress, they talk the way that they did then, back in the late 1700s. And they have some of the buildings that are still there. And so as we were doing the tour, it dawned on me that they were meeting in the biggest building that they had at that time. And that was a pub. And, a pub is a lot like a club or a bar. And so I could only imagine in this pub at the time, they had the ladies of ill repute who lived upstairs. And those were prostitutes, if you will, that lived upstairs, and then they had the bar downstairs. Well, the delegates were meeting in a bar-like atmosphere. These men were away from their families. Many were away from their wives for months at a time. And I can only imagine them sitting around, having drinks, throwing back a beer, or saying we need to break to have some time to relax with the ladies upstairs. And so, which kind of made me realize that's how they came up with these crazy ways that they got this compromise together. So the issue of slavery was like a deal breaker. And so what they did is the Southern delegates did not want to count the slaves as people, whereas the Northern delegates said, but aren't the Declaration of Independence, we all have these unalienable rights that we can't give or take away. And so the compromise they got was, let's just count them as 3/5 of a person for purposes of representation. So it won't be such a big deal. And so that's how that came about. Again, they had to be drunk to come up with this compromise. And then the other thing that was a deal breaker was the nature of the presidency. And so the convention adopted a single executive model for the presidency, which gave the president a 4-year term with considerable constitutional powers. And so, and we still kind of go through that. This next section talks about horizontal powers, which are governmental powers that go across the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, where we have built-in checks and balances so that no branch can become too powerful. The idea of judicial review, that the judiciary has the power to interpret these laws and use the power to judge on the constitutionality of a law of the other branches. And then you have the whole idea of the writ of habeas corpus, where the judicial order enabling jail prisoners to come to court and are to return to court after being convicted and sentenced to determine the legality of their detention. And then I like this chart. You would need to zoom in on it and make it bigger for you to actually see it. And you can do that by, let me see. Well, you'd have to bring it into download it as a PowerPoint, and then you can enlarge it so you can see these areas. But these the blue areas say what that particular branch is responsible for. And then the two other areas for that branch, where it says executive and judicial at the very top, where you see the blue area for the legislative branch, that's what the legislative branch can do. And then the executive and judicial, that's how they check the legislative branch. So I like that chart a lot. Those of you all maybe who are more visual may be able to see this or understand this particular chart a little bit better on the slide number 26. It is just a different visual depiction of what was on slide 25. And so when you look at vertical powers, excuse me, I should have had some water. You can see how things flow vertically. And when we have the different articles of the Constitution, Article 1 is the legislative branch, Article 2 is the executive branch, Article 3 discusses the powers of the judicial branch, and then the other articles talk about how our government really works. When we talk about the battle for the Constitution, the Federalist Papers were probably the biggest thing. Again, many argue that James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay, if you've seen the movie or the play Hamilton, you kind of get an idea how this works together. But they really had more money, and so they were able to distribute their papers more widely across the colonies, therefore gaining more political clout. Whereas the anti-federalists, they were less well-known people, and they just did not have as much influence as the Federalists. So this talks about how we went through the battle of the Constitution to get it ratified. We have the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, and you keep going. And so this talks about how the amendments are proposed and how they're ratified. If you think about our Constitution, it really has withstood the test of time. We had 27 amendments, but 10 of them came at the same time. And so, and then of that 27, two of them, one was about prohibition and one appeal prohibition. So we like our alcohol here in America, obviously. So they really like to um, use Abraham Lincoln and that Gettysburg Address, if you want to listen to that, as a key to the ideals of equality and self governance protected in the Constitution. So that's chapter 2. And then chapter 3, it's just a whirlwind, talks about federalism and kind of where do we stand. And when we talk about federalism, federalism is actually how the government works to get everything done. And so, in order to really know how the government works, you have to know this diagram on on slide 3 in chapter 3. And in order to look at that, you have the national powers, you have shared powers, and you have state powers. Hold on one second, Shayla. So I'm sorry, my children are in here. It is a Saturday afternoon. You have these federal, the national powers, shared powers, and state powers. You do need to be able to note um, powers in each of these areas. So you do want to study that chart. This is a good depiction of American federalism. Many people like to think that we have a layered cake federalism where you have this section, then this section, then this section, but it's really not that. We really have a more pragmatic approach to federalism, and it's more like a marble cake. So it's hard to really know where federal government is and where the state government takes place or where local government happens. You really have to know the nuances of the government that we have. So we first started, we had a unitary system when the colonists first got to the United States. We had a confernal system during where we had the 13 colonies, but now we have a federal system. When we think about these advantages, they're really pretty simple. Having a large government gives us the advantage of it being able to have more diversity, being to have more people participate, disperses the power, creates and encourages experimentation and innovation. But the disadvantages is that this dispersal of power may allow some groups in certain regions to protect their interests while obstructing or ignoring national mandates or other things. This example is really, really old, but this is when each state could set their own um, speed limit. It's really not like that today because we have federal laws, interstate laws, because the government gives states money to do upkeep on their highways. And so we don't have as large variance, but it's funny, like in California, what is warp factor 3? Like, how did they even get that? And then you have down in Florida where you have a snail picture. So it's like, I guess they go at a snail's pace really slow. So it is interesting how you had all these variations of speed, but now it's really more uniform where you have a slower speed limit if you have more exits and on ramps off on and off the highway. But if you're on a turnpike, so to speak, like here in Oklahoma, we have lots of turnpikes. But if you have a turnpike where there's not very many exits, you have a tendency to have a higher speed limit. We have the triad of powers. This is an important thing to realize. However, the 10th Amendment is largely meaningless today. So, in this triad of powers, you have the Interstate Commerce Clause, you have the General Welfare Clause, and the 10th Amendment. When we think about public servants, who are they? We have more people who work for the government than any other company or business in America. So, and then the other thing is when you think about federalism, you would be hard pressed to find a segment of our lives that the government is not involved in. So just think about it. What is something that the government doesn't have any regulations over? So when we think about national powers, we have this chart which kind of gives what the national powers are. You know, declare war, raise and support an army, coin and regulate money, create naturalization laws. Those are some of the big things that our federal government does. Again, this is that circular chart that we saw on slide, I think it was 2 or 3. This is another area of that chart, kind of gives some different terms that you would need to know. So national powers and delegated powers are the same. Concurrent powers are those powers that the state and federal governments share. And then state powers are reserve powers are the same. So when we think of the number of local governments in each state, if you look here in Oklahoma, we have over 1,800 different governments. So that's state, local, municipal governments, that's, even some tribal governments. So you have a bunch of different ones. We don't have half as many as they do in Texas, but we have quite a few. Um, if you look at this next one, you look at the federally recognized tribes. Um, and in Oklahoma, we have 7. But if you look at Alaska, they have 225. So they have lots of indigenous people and groups that are sovereign to Alaska. When we look at state powers, these are the things that states control. So they provide our education, they protect our public health and safety, our property rights, and then they are actually the states control our local, state, and national elections. And I'm sure you all have heard a lot about elections and laws and states where they have some issues. Um, the other thing is how does the federal government get money to the states and local governments, and they do that through federal grants and then federal mandates. So these grants are done like these different formula grant project and then combined grants that you apply for. Most recently, Oklahoma Panhandle State was awarded a large grant as a Halo College for 20 having at least 25% student Hispanic student population. And so they are the only college in the state of Oklahoma that have this designation. And it's because they applied for this grant and they received it. And so they have extra money that they received in order to give wraparound services to provide Hispanic students um, tools that they need to be successful in college completion. The other thing here are federal mandates. Federal mandates are funded and unfunded. You've probably heard of some executive orders and mandates that our new president Biden has signed in his first few days of office. Again, most of these mandates are unfunded. The most famous mandate, our executive order that has come out, has been on education, No Child Left Behind, by President Bush by President Bush, and that particular mandate um, said that we don't want to leave any child left behind. It was probably one of the best written mandates, our executive orders we've had to date, but it didn't have any money with it. So it was hard for many of those items to actually come to fruition because the states and local governments just did not have money to get things done. These next couple of pages, there's really not a lot of test questions over them, but I wanted you to be familiar with the evolution of the federal system and over the years on how things have changed, some of the landmark constitutional amendments that we've covered, and then as we look at presidents, excuse me, you can see how we've changed over the years with the presidents that we have. And then kind of coming up to George W. Bush. I don't have an update on here for Obama, but he really actually extended many of the things that George W. Bush did, as well as adding a lot on newer issues, like LGBT issues and civil rights issues that were starting to expire. Is more of what Obama did, and then President Obama, and then President Trump, hence was more conservative and rolled back several of those issues, as far as our oh, I'm losing my train of thought. I rolled back a lot of issues for minorities and international people coming in to study and things like that. So that is, whoops, wait a minute. Let's go back and share some more. So I wanted to, let's go back. That's really the three chapters. The video on Lessons of Katrina talk about how federalism really works. It gives you an example. That's a very good example of how federalism works. So then if you go to content tools and go to quizzes, you can see that you have test number 1 is due by this Friday. Oh, I have that date wrong. I need to go in and change that. Let me go in and change it. I'll go in and change it. It has the date wrong. It's the 26th. The due date is the 26th. I don't know how I have the 29th. I got the date wrong. But it's the 26th, which is Friday, and you can take the exam 2 times, and it will record your highest score. So you want to make sure that you have studied prior to taking it, but you can take it twice. So if you didn't make the test, the grade that you wanted to make the first time, you can go back and take it again. If you score lower on the second time, it only records your highest score. I allow you to take the exam twice in case you have a technical difficulty. So you do want to make sure that you're able to have unfettered time. You're not disturbed when you take the exam, but you do have 2 times to take the exam. When you go on to grades, once I have graded something, you can see your points here, and then you can also see the percentage of the grade that you received here. If for some reason you did not receive the grade in which you believe you deserve, you can go back, and in the Dropbox, you would go back and you would see your score here, and then you would also see your evaluation status. So many times, if I took points off, I will tell you why I took points off. Sometimes you upload something and I can't open it, so you receive a 0, and then I will put in the comment area, please, I couldn't open this file, please resubmit. Excuse me. So that's how that works there. The other thing is many were asking where the discussion was. It's under content tools. So if you go to discussion, you'll see our weekly discussions. Most of you all have been doing pretty good, but you need to do an original post, and then you need to respond to 2 other people. So in order for this to really work, we have to have people, my dates are wrong. Oh, no, they're not. My dates aren't wrong. I'm looking at my calendar. My calendar is wrong. I was on March. Oh, that's February. I need to look on January. Come on, get it together. So yeah, Friday, January the 29th is the correct date. I was looking at the wrong calendar on the side of my desk, not the proper date of January 29th. So January 29th is when module 1 is due. I have, and I will continue to do this, post maybe some makeup discussions. So this one is still available until January the 29th for you to watch this YouTube video and then give me your thoughts on Trump's second impeachment. I did, let's see, I can go back and in the Dropbox, not many of you, in the Dropbox, if you scroll down to the bottom, I have an extra credit area. So there's still one here that's open until the 29th. I only had maybe 5 or 6 people do the inauguration extra credit. So you just want to keep abreast of that. I believe if we go back, let's see, you go back to here, our home page, you can see the things that are due on the side. So it'll see the due dates as they come up. And then again, like I said, I will send, I usually do a post of an update of the announcement, and then I try to copy whatever that announcement is and send it out as an email, which I'll do now. I will set up another Zoom if you all think that is something that you may want to do on a weekly basis, and you can come in and you can ask me questions. So what I'll do is I'll set up a Zoom for tomorrow. I need to look at my schedule. I can set up a Zoom for like on Sundays. So if you have questions, we can come on and you can reach me that way. I will get better with answering my emails. I couldn't open the OPSU email for a little bit, but I think I have that resolved now. So if you send me an email, we can do that. If for some reason I don't see your email in a timely fashion for you, you can send me a text message because I have provided you all with my cell phone number. And again, I think doing a Zoom on a fairly regular basis, at least I will do it during the module to kind of go through the PowerPoints like I did today. So you can go back and watch if you want. We can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and end this particular recording at this time and try to get it posted in our D2L class. Thank you for listening.